Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Greatly Destined Podcast. I'm Uzézi. And today, this is a very interesting episode, an episode that I'm very passionate about. America has been experiencing issues with the police department politically and socially for some time now, particularly the black community in America. Another incident of what some will call police brutality, what many call police brutality, has arisen in Memphis. As you guys know, the 5 officers who killed the African-American male in Memphis. It's very important to me that we talk about those type of situations and we dissect them. That's why I decided to invite none other than former Assistant Chief of the Milwaukee Police Department to help me talk through those issues and how the black community and everyone as a whole can create a better relationship with the police and what the police department can do to create a better relationship with the community. Milwaukee Police Department, former Assistant Chief of the Milwaukee Police Department, Mr. Raymond Banks. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you so much for coming on my show. It means a lot to me. Very, very much so. You told me right before we started that you grew up not too far from the studio.
Yes.
Okay. And how was that growing up in Milwaukee for you?
Well, I was actually born in Memphis. My family moved to Milwaukee in 1973.
That's very ironic.
So Memphis is my hometown.
Really?
Yes.
So what happened in Memphis that kind of touched home to you? Touched home a little bit more for you?
It touched home greatly because I was in Memphis when Dr. King was killed. I was only 5 years old, and my grandfather was a sanitation worker. Dr. King came to Memphis to help the sanitation workers who were on strike. My family participated in all of the marches, demonstrations. My mom was at I've been to the mountaintop speech. I've had probably thousands of conversations with my grandfather regarding the civil rights movement and regarding police brutality. And one of the things that he always stated to me was that this is not how people are supposed to act, and this is not how the police are supposed to treat people.
Yeah.
But he also made sure that I understood that not all police were bad and not all people were bad. Mm-hmm. And he always said, do something in the community that would do something good. And from that moment on, I always knew I wanted to be a police officer. So I can sit here and tell you that April 4th, 1968 changed my life forever.
The day, the King assassination.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's kind of what inspired you to be a police officer as well?
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you had a conversation with my mother right now, she'll tell you as long as she can remember, and she didn't know the driving force behind it was the talks with her father, my grandfather, was about, doing something good for the community, and this is not how people are supposed to act. The Claiborne Temple in Memphis, Tennessee is where the sanitations and workers and Dr. King used to meet. And the Claiborne Temple had gotten to a point where they wanted to tear it down in Memphis. Instead, they made it a historical site. And what they decided to do was build a monument. Back during these demonstrations, they used to carry signs that said, "I am a man," and you see them all over when you see civil rights marches. That message was to the mayor of Memphis to tell him that the sanitation workers wanted to be treated like men in these negotiations. So they built a monument outside the Claiborne Temple in the image of "I am a man." And they inscribed all of the names of the sanitation workers during that time period on it. And my grandfather's name is inscribed on that monument. Mm-hmm. And I've always wanted to make sure that I represented the people that made the sacrifices for me beforehand. That's what led me to where I ended up with the Milwaukee Police Department when we came here to Milwaukee.
Okay. So can you do me a favor, sir? Can you mind if you tilt the microphone just so it's parallel to you? And upwards. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Growing up in Memphis, I mean, you said 1968. How old were you in 1968, if you don't mind me asking?
I was 5 years old.
5 years old. So you're not extremely far removed from growing up in the Jim Crow South.
No, I remember April 4th, 1968 like it was yesterday. I remember the fires. I remember the cars being turned over. I remember the police beating people. I remember seeing people running from the police. I mean, it's such a vivid memory.
When you saw everything that was going on in 2020 with all the riots and the rioting, did that kind of strike that memory back from 1968? Were they similar images?
You know what really brought back those memories was the uprising in the Sherman Park area. That brought back memories of Memphis because I'll give you an example. My parents, they lived in Sherman Park before they moved back to Memphis. They're back in Memphis now. And one of the corner stores was burned up, the gas station. That's the store my son used to go to. And all I remembered was when I was in Memphis that the corner store where we used to buy candy and stuff caught on fire. And as a kid, you know, the first thing you're thinking, where we're going to buy our cookies and candy and stuff at now. That brought back that memory when I saw that gas station on fire, because that's the station my son used to go to buy his snacks and that kind of thing. So yeah, absolutely. That's
very interesting. In Milwaukee, when you became a police officer in Milwaukee, what were some things that you noticed that you wanted to change when you first got here? My biggest thing is I wanted to change the way the police were viewed by the community. I wanted them to understand that not all police officers was bad. And I still continue to believe that not all, there are more good officers than bad. If you ever need water, that's for you, by the way.
Thank you. Okay.
You said, yeah, well, of course, like not all police officers are bad. Do you believe that's a perception that's harder to push, or not a perception, but that's a point of view that's harder to push nowadays?
Absolutely. Because every time you make a gain, something like what happened in Memphis, you have to take 2 or 3 steps backwards, because now you got to start rebuilding all over again. Because that narrative, no matter where it happens, it affects everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah. When you see something like that as a black officer, how does that offend you?
The situation in Memphis offended me greatly because of my roots there. Most of my family is still there. My parents are back there. And I know the rich civil rights history that occurred there. I know all the sacrifices that people made in order for black police officers to be even hired by the Memphis Police Department.
Yeah.
They put us back 60 years just by their conduct.
So you think it's going to be tough for black police officers to be hired there again?
It's always tough.
I thought, I was told that black police officers were actually, the majority of police officers in Memphis are black, no?
They are.
Do you think that's going to change now?
I don't think it's going to change with the hiring process. I think it's going to change with the perception, and being able to gain that trust back.
Yeah. And that was my biggest issue with that entire situation in Memphis. I met the current leader of the League of Nations, the League of Martin. I apologize, not League of Nations. So let me just actually give you even a deeper introduction. You're also the founder of League of Martin here in Milwaukee?
No.
Oh, you were the former.
I was part of, and I still am part of the League of Martin, even as being retired. But
actually, the founder was a gentleman from like the 60s, right?
One of the founders is former Chief of Police Arthur Jones.
Arthur Jones. Okay, got you. And you were just you were a member.
I was a member
for how long?
My entire career.
Okay. And reason I wanted you on is because I met Sergeant Troy Johnson at Juneteenth last year. And I loved the League of Martin and everything it's about, because I firmly believed for us to kind of fix the police brutality issue right now is to work from within and work outwards. And what I mean by that is, okay, if the black community has distrust with the police officers, why? That's because history, police officers weren't very kind to them. And what were the race of those police officers that weren't kind to them? It was traditionally white men. Now, this is when discrimination is needed in some cases. Not all discrimination is bad. There's nothing we can do about the fact that people who grow up in impoverished areas don't trust white police officers. Nothing we can do about that. That's just what it is. So how can we what can we do to be proactive about that reality? I was under the impression that you just place police officers who grew up in those type of neighborhoods and have them patrol those neighborhoods. Because I never felt it was right to have a white guy who grew up in the suburbs and has no idea what life is like to live in the hood or like the Milwaukee North Side or something like that and police those people. You know, of course there's going to be a distrust there. So what I was feeling like was just put black officers who grew up in those areas to police them. What do you think about that?
So you've said a lot with the statement you just made. I disagree slightly with some of the things that you said. So let's start with the thing that I slightly disagree with.
Okay.
I don't think that it's impossible to get the trust of the African-American community of white officers. I think that trust can be gained simply by collaborating together, talking, and engaging about things such as the conversations that we're having. Because there are good white officers, just like there are good black officers that believe in doing what's right.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to condemn them because I've made a lot of lifelong friends that are white officers that I trust, deeply.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'd like to say that when you talk about trying to gain the trust of the community, that trust oftentimes is reflective of the uniform that you're wearing more so than the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can tell you that I've walked into numerous volatile situations trying to calm that situation, but because of the uniform that I had on, I didn't have the ability to do that. Where I truly want to come in and say, hey, I'm one of the good guys, and they weren't trying to hear that. There have been times where I've been able to come in and say that, and people were, oh, I'm glad to see you. So I'm just saying, so it's half empty and half full when it comes to who is the best people to represent the community. But one thing I will tell you, I truly believe that a police force should be reflective of the community that they're serving.
Mm-hmm.
Most police departments they do give cultural sensitivity training. They give implicit bias training. And I can tell you my belief is that you can provide all the training in the world, but if people don't believe in what they're sitting in as relates to the training, it's not going to change.
If the officers don't believe in it?
Correct. So you got to buy into the training that you're getting. If the training becomes more of a nuisance, something that you got to sit in and sit through, but you don't buy into it, it's not going to change anything. So I guess you can't change the human heart, I guess is the best way that I'm putting that.
Why would some officers not buy into the training? Is it because they don't care or they just don't believe in its tactics?
I think it's a combination of both. I don't want to make any excuses for bad behavior. But imagine, if you will, that every time you get up to go to work, you put on a vest, you kiss your family goodbye, you don't know if you're going to come back to work. And for the next 8 hours, you're going to get people calling you all kind of names for the whole shift. When you show up to help people, when you show up and something has happened to someone and everybody is giving you the finger or F off or that kind of thing, at what point do you become desensitized to that? And you say to yourself, if they don't care, why should I care?
Mm-hmm.
I never took that attitude, but I'm just trying to give you a human side of that. How do you fix your brain to say that these people really care about me when you're getting spit on for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week?
Yeah.
I had a relative that asked me once. He told me about a location in a drug house in the city. He said the police drive by there every day and they got to know it's there. Why don't they do anything about it? I said, well, let me pose this to you. People have constitutional rights. You can't just run up in anybody's house, even if it's a drug house. At the point that you do get enough evidence or information or probable cause to go into a house, you go in there and you end up shooting and killing somebody. People are not going to embrace you because now you've gone and tried to shut down the drug house. Everyone is going to be pointing the finger that the police just killed an innocent man.
Yeah.
it becomes a thing of where do you risk your career and your life for a community that doesn't seem to embrace you back?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it right. That's not what you're hired to do. But I just want to talk about the realities of how policing works and the type of things that can impact you from getting, the level of services that you want.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example. There was a road rage incident where a 3-year-old girl was shot in the head and killed. The officers that responded, the mom was there, and she was attempting to push brain matter back into the head of the 3-year-old and try to give it's her daughter.
Yes, of course. She's trying to,
she's trying
the image just got me.
Yeah, so she was sitting in the middle of her siblings, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. Blood and brain matter are on them. It's all over the mom. They had to move the mom back so that they can try and perform CPR on a little girl that they knew was already dead. They still had to try and do this until the ambulance got there. The ambulance got there and they took the little girl in the ambulance and they continued CPR. Now, those 2 officers have to stay at the scene until all of the evidence is collected and everything else. Once all of that's done, and this was the very first assignment out the door at like 10 after 8 in the morning. After all of that, they have to go back to the station, clean themselves up, change uniforms, and then go to the next assignment. So I always tell people when you get an officer that might not be so nice, maybe think about what they may be coming from. There's no excuse. There's a fine line between being just outright rude and nasty versus being kind of direct. Sometimes the previous assignment will wear on you.
Yeah.
You're human. You cannot take the human element out of any training of any police officer that you give.
Yeah.
So those are things that, that you typically want people to know about.
Mm-hmm.
And people typically will say, well, you're trained for this. You volunteered for this. You should know that this is going to happen. But you still can't unsee what you just saw.
Mm-hmm. I saw somewhere one time that the police force policing actually has one of the highest suicide rates and poor mental health rates out of all professions.
Highest suicide and highest divorce rate.
Oof. Why is that the case?
The suicide rate, and I think they both go hand in hand as it relates to the things that you see. The hours that the job demands. I can't tell you how many parent-teacher conferences, athletic events, and things that I missed for my son growing up because I had to work. And when you're new, you work second and third shift probably for about 15 years before you can actually work day shift and have somewhat of a normal life.
Really?
So you miss a whole lot of things. Family coming into town, you got to go to work. You're working holidays and weekends when people with seniority, they get that time off.
Oh.
So it becomes more of a really thankless career.
Thankless career.
Yes.
All that just for people to hate. There was a time when the police officers were like celebrities in town. They walked into the room, all heads turned, like cops are here. Yeah. They sit down in the restaurant, everybody's looking at them and almost like celebrities. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, oh, cops are here. You know what I'm saying? So that's unfortunate.
Let me say that when incidents like in Memphis happen, or even like the George Floyd situation, it's really hard to try and build back on that trust and to get people to really believe that they're good police officers. And you're condemned. There's a total lack of trust. People don't believe in transparency that comes from you. Yeah. And it is really difficult to try and build that back. One of the things that I always say is that here in the city of Milwaukee, for instance, we have black on black crime that occurs, a conversation that people don't want to have, don't want to honestly have.
Yeah. I was gonna mess around and make a joke. I'll be like, hey, watch out now. Don't say that. People hate you when you say that. Pretend like it's not something we can talk about,
Yeah, people don't want to have.
Change the term if the term offends you, but don't pretend like it doesn't exist. You know what I'm saying?
It's an issue. However, I can tell you from experience that all black males are not bad. All black males are not criminals. All black males are not robbers and everything else. I'm a black male. I know that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
However, when we go into neighborhoods and that type of thing, people don't want to be judged on the color of their skin, the gender, or where they live.
Mm-hmm.
They want officers to judge them based on the content of their character.
Mm-hmm.
Police officers, by the same nature, don't want to be judged by the uniform that they're wearing. They want to be judged by the people that they are. Oftentimes, you're judged by the uniform that you're wearing because of the action of someone that happened in another state.
Yeah.
So you really don't get an opportunity to show them, hey, I'm one of the good guys. I'm not that way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a guy that asked me, how come more officers don't speak up when bad things are happening? You can pull aside probably every good officer that you know, and they'll tell you about conversations that they pulled some officer aside and say, don't ever do that again. Don't do that around me. If you do this again, I'm going to do this. That happens where people do pull their coworkers aside and say, I don't like how you handled that situation.
Mm-hmm. Inner checks and balances.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But what are they supposed to do when they do that? Take out an ad in the paper or go on TV to say, hey, I just told him not to do this again.
Take out their phone, put it on social media.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what everyone else does. So
yeah, so that is one of those things where, you know, it's probably never going to be publicly discussed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, and if something does happen,
because it's just going to make the department look worse if everybody's posting the checks and balances. Oh, I just told this crooked officer not to do this today. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And
it's really no different than if you were working in a restaurant or someplace else where you have a coworker that does something against policy and you don't want to be part of that and you don't want to take a chance on losing your job. You tell that person not to do this again. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. The principles are the same.
Uh-huh. Is very interesting. It's almost as if there's a culture of police hate nowadays. I remember during the 2020 political riots and political turmoil that was going on, this was at the peak of it. We're in the quarantine, the lockdown, the George Floyd thing just went down, and people were rioting in Chicago and all over the country. And this is when I was living in the suburb of Chicago at the time. So I was just walking into the store, and I saw a police officer just sitting in his car, and the idea just like sprung on me, and I'm like, let me just go walk up to this cop and just go tell him, thank you for your service, and I want to let you know you're appreciated, and that they wanted there's an agenda to divide us. And then he just seemed so, it was like 50,000 pounds just fell off of his shoulder because one person said thank you. Like, wow, thank you, I really appreciate that. And I liked the moment. The cop liked the moment, so I went on social media and I posted about it. I said, I saw a cop today, and despite everything that's going on, I wanted him to let him know that I appreciated him, and I felt good. It was a good moment. That's what I said. And instantly, like 15 people came into the comments and they were going at me. They're like, why would you do that? Don't you know cops he probably doesn't even like you. You're black. I'm like, so what did you want me to do? Throw a brick at his head because some other cop did something racist in an entirely different state? Exactly. Like, it makes no sense. It's very unfortunate.
I can tell you that comment goes a long way when you say it to an officer. And I tell people to tell them that all the time. I tell soldiers that when I see them. Mm-hmm. Because you just never know what they just got done.
Exactly.
Dealing with. And to know that somebody took the time to say, we appreciate you, means a lot.
Goes a very long way. What's the biggest problem that you see in Milwaukee right now?
Hands down, I think it's reckless driving.
Why you say that?
Because of the amount of devastation that this reckless driving is creating.
Can you pull the microphone, the stand closer to you? Can you pull it? Push. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, the amount of devastation that the activity is causing throughout the city. Mm-hmm. You know, doesn't take you more than 5-10 minutes to drive and realize just how bad.
You're getting a call.
Doesn't take you more than 5-10 minutes to realize just how bad this problem is, and it's everywhere. Mm-hmm. So I think that's the number one hindrance to us having a great quality of life. People are losing their lives. People are being ran over. I can tell you that reckless driving is the reason that I retired. In 2019, at 22nd and Center, there was a 6-year-old and 4-year-old sisters that were crossing the street, and they were ran over by an 18-year-old reckless driver who had no criminal history and killed. And I couldn't even get through the press conference without crying, and I just knew I needed that mental health break. This is really what we're doing to each other. I just needed that break because the other situation that I told you about with the officers coming out of their shift at 8 a.m. where the 3-year-old was killed, that also had a strong impact on me. The fact that we're doing this to each other and the children are suffering as a result of this. If the adults don't protect the children, who will? And when you have adults that are engaging in this type of activity, I want to make myself clear with this too. This is not a young people problem. We got middle-aged people that are engaging in this type of activity as well. The young man, unfortunately, that lost his life last week on 60th and Capitol that ran into the house was 23 years old. He died in that accident. But the car that was racing against him, that driver was 44.
Oh.
So I'm simply saying you find a lot of people saying that this is a problem among our youth, and it's not. It's
not. It's the lack of mentorship with the youth.
Well, it's not all the youth, but I just don't want to blame it on them because
of course.
We consistently see 30, 40, and 50-year-olds engaging in this type of behavior as well.
Then that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why I said lack of mentorship. Like, you're a 40-year-old racing with a 23-year-old kid. You should be mentoring him. You should be the one saying, nah, kid, you don't do that. But you're racing with them. And so that's why, like, it goes back to that, like, no one is pulling them aside to be better, you know?
You know, we are at a point. I never thought that I would say this. I have always been part of being proactive.
Yeah.
Trying to get some of the social, economical challenges that we see in our community abated. You know, working with nonprofit organizations. We have really gotten to a time where we got to put adequate punishment for these type of actions. Because you consistently see people being slapped on the wrist, not taking advantage of the chance that they get, and they continue to go out there and wreak havoc on the community. I never thought I would be the person sitting here saying this to you, because I always believe in proactive and trying to change people's mind. And I haven't changed my desire to want to help our youth, you know, change and become part of a positive related to their conduct in the community. But we really got to start trying to make sure that the actions and the punishments line up with each other.
Speaking of that, the lack of consequences, I don't feel like they're giving these Kia kids, Kia thugs, Kia boys, whatever they call themselves, I don't feel like they're giving them enough consequences. A lot of them are getting slapped on the wrist, you know. In 2021, Milwaukee had 10,486 cases of car thefts, but that number did lower in 2022. It was 8,040. However, that is still outrageous. And a lot of these kids, the community feels like a lot of the kids aren't getting the adequate punishment they deserve. Do you feel like the Kia boys are one of the biggest problems our city has? And not the Kia boys in general, just the car thefts, because I'm sure it's not the Kia boys doing all the car thefts.
No, it's the car thefts, the joyriding, the drug dealers buying cars from these kids so they can continue their roving drug deals on the streets. It's a whole mixture of things that go into these stolen cars. I do believe that we already have the laws on the books to abate these issues. I just believe we need to look at it more aggressively than we do. I'll give you an example. If you stop a reckless driver, and reckless driving could be anything over 25 miles an hour. So let's say you stop a reckless and aggressive driver, guy that's been driving on the sidewalk, and you give him a reckless driving citation. If he doesn't pay that citation, The only thing that happens is that his driver's license is suspended and maybe his registration. That's it. Can't arrest him for it. They know it. So,
I mean, driver's license being suspended is quite a big deal.
no, it's not.
I mean, if you get caught and pulled, you're going to jail.
No, you don't.
No?
No.
Oh, then that ain't shit.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. It means absolutely nothing.
Huh.
You get another ticket for driving without a license, driving while revoked. That's all that happens.
That's crazy.
And then, a good officer would say, hey, you need to get somebody to come pick you up. But most officers, and it don't make them a bad officer because, at that moment you may stop or delay them from driving it again, but they're going to be driving again tomorrow.
Yeah.
There's no recourse to this whatsoever. My suggestion is that if you're driving so reckless that the officer has to pull you over for reckless driving, that they arrest you for endangering safety by use of a dangerous weapon, which is a crime. Reckless driving citation is a municipal forfeiture. Endangering safety by use of a dangerous weapon is a crime, which means you can get arrested. They can tow your car for evidence. Mm-hmm. You're in jail, your car is gone. That could be an adequate deterrence for others not to continue in this type of behavior. I can't tell you how many times I've sat at a stoplight, see a car pull up to me in the turn lane, look both ways, and go right through the light. So we have a problem where we're going to have to take extraordinary measures to try and fix, and it's not going to happen overnight. There's no silver bullet to this.
Mm-hmm. Milwaukee actually broke its homicide record for 3 years in a row.
Yes.
3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something, what do you think as a city we need to do, our government officials need to do to curb that?
So the approach to that has to be twofold. A two-pronged approach being reactive and proactive. Reactive is going to be aggressively going after whoever committed these homicides and try and bring them to justice and prosecute them to the fullest extent. Proactive is trying to get in front of it before whoever pulls that trigger does pull that trigger. If you know someone that's wilding out or somebody in your family that's gunning for somebody, see something, say something. That could mean the difference of keeping your loved ones out of prison and keeping someone from being killed. But we don't do that. In fact, what we do here in this city, we don't say much of anything until it happens on our very own doorstep, but then it's too late. We need to start trying to work with some of the community-based organizations, some of the churches, and some of the other organizations that are out there that are looking to try and help prevent people from committing these violent crimes and making better decisions in their life. Because once you make that decision, all bets are off.
Are there any good organizations in Milwaukee that you see that are doing that?
There's a lot of social service organizations. We can start with the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, just that simple. I participated in the Boys and Girls Club until I aged out. And I give them a lot of credit for the way my life ended up, keeping me on the straight and narrow. Mm-hmm. I lost one of my best friends in 1979, I think it was. He tried to rob a tavern.
Jeez.
And when he went in to rob that tavern, the bartender had a gun, and the bartender pulled the gun from under the bar and shot him 6 times and killed him. And he had a BB gun. He was only 15 years old.
6 times is crazy.
He was only 15 years old. And if you shoot someone 6 times, I'm not saying that it's not overkill.
You don't think that's a little overkill? You're a police officer. You know how that shooting stuff works better than I do. So
2.5 seconds.
That's what it takes?
2.5 seconds. You can do it quicker than that in some cases.
Are you saying, what do you mean 2.5 seconds?
That's about how long it takes you to shoot someone 6 times.
Okay. Oh, so you're just saying he doesn't realize it 6 times. He's just trying to make sure he goes down.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that story was on the news for probably about a month because you didn't see that happen. Today, if that happens, it may not even get any airtime, and if it does, it's probably 10 minutes into the news, And we got to get to the point where we don't allow those type of stories to be the norm.
Uh-huh.
But they are the norm right now. And as a community and a society, we got to work together where we don't allow this to become the norm.
Do you think the media plays a role in the negative perception of police officers?
I think the media plays a role in sending either the good message or the bad message. It depends on the way that they present the message.
Present the news, the angle.
Yeah. Give you an example. I'm going to go back to the 3-year-old that was killed in the road rage incident. And one of the questions, now the 3-year-old that was killed in the road rage incident, she was sitting in between her 2-year and 4-year-old siblings. And she was shot in the head. The question was, after that information I just gave you, that she was sitting between her 2 siblings and her mom was driving, was there anyone else hurt in that incident? And I immediately got emotional about that because I just told you that she was sitting between her 4-year-old sibling and her 2-year-old. Do I need to get graphic to say they had blood, brain matter all over them? They saw their sister dead. They saw their mother trying to awaken her. How much do you need to tell someone before people? And I'm not condemning the media. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong, because I think that they have a tough job too. But we have to think about the unforeseen victims when these things happen. And when we send that message out there, the message is about the people that we don't really think about. You know, I think about my brother got in trouble. And I think about the nights that my mom cried. We were raised in the same household. And I think about how that affected them. They were unintended victims. They didn't do anything wrong, but they were suffering as a result of that. Mm-hmm. You see that all across the place. That kid that killed the officer. I don't know his parents, but somebody loved him. You know what I'm saying? And we're not going to think about those people because of the actions that they did. Yeah. You know, but
so now their loss is in vain.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you say about the message that the media presents the story that they think is going to gain the traction and that people are going to be interested in. People are not going to care about the family of this young man.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because of what he did. I get it and I understand it. And I'm not even saying that they should care about him. Mm-hmm. But I'm just simply saying that I get it and I understand. But when we start to look at the messages that the media is presenting, I don't know if there's a better way for them to do their job other than presenting things in the most accurate way possible.
Yeah. And I feel like the media, a lot of times they have the power. Right now, people, whether it's warranted or not, right now people look at cops the way they do because of the media.
With the media,
whether it's warranted or not.
With the stories that are occurring. So let's stick with Memphis. What other way could they present that story where people wouldn't think negatively about the police? I think that their hands were tied.
Yeah.
You know, with that. Take George Floyd. What other way could they present that story that would not make the police look bad?
It's crazy. People still found like this. I'm a guy. You are literally a cop, and you're exhibiting balance right in front of me. It's crazy that during the George Floyd situation, there were people who weren't even police officers and were so biased that they couldn't just admit maybe this was a little not okay. Like they were still pulling for straws to find things, you know. But I bring that up because, like, even if the media tried to, like, I bring that up because the media's hands were tied. Like, that's what happened. Fentanyl in his system, whatever the case may be. That's neither here or there. But you saw his knee on his neck for 9. Like, you tell me, is that excessive or not as a cop?
Absolutely excessive.
Mm-hmm. 9 minutes.
My whole thing when I saw that, there's a thing that's called police override. So if, like me and my partner, when I was on the street, we had this thing where if one of us got emotional with dealing with the situation or lost their temper, we tap each other on the shoulder and say, hey, partner, I got it.
I've heard that.
That means you step back, and now I engage. If someone would have simply tapped Chauvin on the shoulder and pulled him off George Floyd and said, I got him. Or when George Floyd didn't want to get into that car, he's 6'6", call for a police wagon. He's a big guy. That's what you have wagons for. Call for the wagon. He'd have got in there. Hopefully he'd have got in there without, complaining about not wanting to get in the police car. And so we can Monday night quarterback it all day long, but at the end of the day, the one thing that's absolutely certain, he should have never put his foot on his neck for 9 minutes. And someone should have stepped up. Mm-hmm. And I also didn't like the fact that the Asian officer was told.
I hated that. Guy pissed me off the most.
Yeah, me too. Well, Chauvin pissed me off the most.
Obviously, but yeah.
That there was a first responder telling him, look, he doesn't appear to be breathing. Let me help. And his only response was get back on the sidewalk. That just...
Do you think those are power trips?
I think that it's an officer that's not caring about the public and the people that are talking to him. Everybody is saying, look, we're not going to go over there. Just go over there and help him. All of the time, he's ignoring all of these pleas from people. If it was me, I can say absolutely, positively, I would have turned and saw that and got him off of it.
I think it could be a power trip because, like, a lot of course, many cops are good people, but let's just admit, that badge, that gun, it's very inviting to not so good people. So, like, people who are who like power and like they'll be incited to be a cop. It'll be attractive for them and stuff like that. When they're telling them, like, dude, like, go check on him, please. It's like, get back on the sidewalk. I'm the police. You don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, that's the case sometimes, and then in other cases, sometimes you're trusting in your fellow officer is going to be doing the right thing. So, take for instance, if you have to take someone to the ground to arrest them. There is no pretty way to do that. I don't care how you do it, and if there's people watching, it's going to look excessive. If a guy's resisting and struggling with you and you need to get him to the ground to handcuff him, it's going to be a bad look no matter how you do it. You can do it textbook with all your training, but people are going to see it and it's going to be looked upon as being bad.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to give him cover, the Asian officer, but what I'm trying to say is that he could easily believe that what's occurring behind him is going according to our training.
Yeah.
However, he had enough people saying things to him that he should have at least looked into.
Acknowledged.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You started in Milwaukee in 1991.
Yes.
When in 1991?
October 28th, 1991 is when I joined the Milwaukee Police Department. But I joined the Wisconsin State Patrol in March of 1990. So I was a Wisconsin State Trooper for almost 2 years.
Okay. I was going to ask you if you were if you remembered anything about the Jeffery Dahmer case, but you came immediately, just like right after that, it looks like.
I was a Wisconsin State Trooper when the Jeffery Dahmer case happened. But I did work with one of the officers that was there on the scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had been here at the time, do you think that would have been the craziest thing you've seen as an officer? Or not so much because you weren't you wouldn't have been, unless you were connected to the case and working on it.
Well, the thing is that you didn't see what Jeffery Dahmer did. You seen the aftermath. Seeing the aftermath of body parts and put in sexual positions and that kind of thing would probably have been the craziest thing I've seen. But just seeing dead bodies and body parts and that kind of thing, I've seen enough of that type of stuff.
Absolutely. What's funny to me is when people think of Milwaukee, it's starting to change now though, but when people think of Milwaukee, they think of like beer, cheese, Green Bay Packers, but they don't think of homicide, and that's starting to change. That perception is starting to change. Do you think eventually we'll get to that point like Chicago? People are coming from France and they're asking Americans, okay, where should I not go and where should I go in Chicago? Because that's become the perception of Chicago. Do you think Milwaukee will ever get there?
I think we're there.
Per capita, we have the numbers. It's just, do we have that same reputation?
I think that we're there because if you look at most dangerous cities in America, Milwaukee usually cracks the top 5. They do it per capita. We usually crack the top 5. And unfortunate for me, both my hometowns are there. Usually Milwaukee and Memphis are there.
Dang.
And they're pretty similar in size, by population. And so I think that we are already there. No, and you think about the way Water Street has changed. Water Street was always considered, a place where all the college kids would go.
Kind of still is, right? Oh, not anymore. That was like 3 shootings last summer.
Yeah, so they've had shootings. They've had homicides. They had 21 people shot down there outside of the Bucks game.
That was crazy. I never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, so
like people generally have. That's why these big arenas, they strategically built their arena around like bad neighborhoods to try to decriminalize the crime rate, like bring down the crime rate, because they figure, okay, this is where our Milwaukee Bucks play. This is where our Chicago Bulls play. Let me have respect and not shoot up over here. Well, and I was shocked when that happened.
That was one of the questions that some of us had when they built the Bradley Center. There's a thing called CPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. What that means is that if you're going to build something, you want to build it based on what's the best and the safest way for people that are going to be attending this location. So when they built the Bradley Center, one of the things, 2 things. We knew that it was a bad location for parking, and people were going to have to park closer to Valete Avenue, which was isolated because you were parking under an overpass for the expressway. Immediately, people's cars started getting broken into. So people would go shopping at the Bradley Center, at the Grand Avenue Mall, take in a Bucks game, their packages they would leave on the seat in the cars, and folks, because that's a very transient area, would break the windows and steal stuff out of their cars.
Insane.
And then the other problem they had with the Bradley Center, the doors were not recessed with the sidewalk. So what that simply means, the doors were not lined up. They were pushed in. So it created like a little hallway, a crevice. Homeless people were going in there when there was no events going on. They would sleep in there, and they would use the bathroom in there, and they do all kind of trash and garbage in there. It created a stench. It also created a lot of cleanup that would have to take place before the events would occur. We would have suggested a different location. We would have suggested a different design for the doorways, the people that were trained in CPTED. So when you go to a lot of other major cities, unlike Chicago, I think they had the same issue at the United Center putting in where they did. But if you go into other major cities, you'll see that they start to put them in upscale suburban.
But that was the initial plan because the hopes was to bring down the crime rate, and it worked in some areas. But Chief Raymond Banks, let's wrap this up. Can you tell the people the best way you believe that the police departments here in Milwaukee and all around the world and the community can start working on creating a better relationship?
Absolutely. I think that there needs to be a series of meetings where people can be involved with the decisions that are occurring to the extent that they can, because you can't always be involved with decisions that the police department are making. But if you feel like you are part of the program and part of the solution, I think it'll make a difference. Both sides got to be able to build trust in each other, because there's a lack of trust on the part of the community and a lack of trust on part of the police. And I think that we got to get away from the us against them and it become a we project.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We got to start thinking about thinking of ourselves as more of a community. Thank you so much, Chief Raymond Banks, for coming on my show. You are deeply appreciated. Always remember that. And thank you guys for tuning into another episode of the Greatly Destined Podcast, episode 11. See you guys next time.